Hello again, guys. It is I, Freeze700. We are back with some lore on the War of Vengeance, the first battle ever, known as Corvinath. Now, up until this point, it has been 8 years since the ancient runesmith has died, and the dwarves have been assembling a throng ready for war. Now, they've been assembling in Blackfire Pass. Nearby was the trade city of Corvinath. Now, in peaceful times, in times long forgotten, it seems, the dwarves would trade with Corvinath quite frequently, and they earned a lot of money from doing so. Both settlements prospered immensely. But due to the elves' perceived betrayal by the dwarves, they have assembled a throng to right this grudge. With the armies comes just about a dwarf army from every damn hold except for Krakadrak. And the few dwarves that did come from Karazakarak are strictly there to defend Snorri. So that's why I'm not going to individualize each thing here unless there's actually something important to individualize. But besides that, the setting is pretty basic. The birds are singing, the trees are shining bright, a little bit of snow scattered around the grass, and thousands of people dead. So, let's begin. How did this fight start? Over in the far side of the field, we got the dwarves. With it, we have a lot of fucking dwarf warriors with a few longbeards in the backs, with a few Hearthguard for each individual king that decides to show up. Now, the Hearthguard would be not exactly Ironbreakers, but just extremely skilled warriors who are really well equipped. So, almost like Ironbreakers. Now, besides that, the center is mostly consisted of just about every dwarf hold. That's why I have it rainbow colored here instead of just primarily colored. Up at the top here, also known as the left flank, we have Karak Varn. Karak Varn brought majority of the siege engines with 50 grudge throwers and 25 bolt throwers. That is a lot of firepower. That is just insane how many catapults and ballistas he brought, with his own little Hearthguard and dwarf warriors in the front to protect. And down here at the bottom, also known as the right flank, we have Zufbar. This is the reason why I colored these two individuals, is because apparently these two nations held specific fronts, and they did very specific tactics. The Zufbar is more or less just a shield wall of his very own warriors. Now, as far as the numbers go, the dwarves range 45,000. There is a lot of dwarves. Now, we don't know what number the elves started at, but we do know that there was 8,000 elves by the time they retreated into the city. And if that's the case, then I'm assuming that they lost around half their number prior to that. So we're looking at 16,000 elves. So, speaking about elves, let's jump on over to their side. Let's see what their armory composition is. So, right off the bat, we're going to talk about the city first. The city has 2 big watchtowers. It's got a little bit more, but I didn't feel like drawing that many. And each side, each watchtower is a garrison of archers. And, of course, that being said, most of the pentagons you're going to see are going to be archer squads. That's exactly it. The elves brought a shit ton of arrows to this fight. Most of them were garrisoning the walls, and, of course, with any archer complement, there must be a shield wall, more specifically a spear wall. So in the blue capsules, we have a lot of spears, a lot of shields. The capability to hold off the dwarves was ideally what they were going for. Now in the triangle here, the gray triangle with the pink outline, this is the Silver Helm horses. Silver Helm are very awesome at cavalry charges, but the only problem is that they're kind of limited. Also, more important to note, the blue star inside the city is the Lord himself, who's riding his own white horse. And we will soon find out that he's got a few more horses than what he was willing to use in the initial fight. So, let's look at the initial fight. How did it go? What happened? Both armies charged each other out. The Silver Helms were going for the flanks, as they always do, but instead they were met by Zufbar, and Zufbar flat out broke the Silver Helms. Their shield wall was impervious to charges, and something else that's more interesting is that what the dwarves do when they get charged by a horse is they usually shoulder bash the horse's chest, which usually breaks its ribs and lets the horse die because it's not able to breathe. And with the horse down, the rider is pretty damn helpless to the dwarfs' fury of vengeance. Now, the spear walls were easily shattered. They did do their mark, though. They were able to get a few pierces, a few jabs through the dwarven shields and hit a few dwarves, kill a few, but nothing in the range that they were looking for. Basically, for every 1,000 elves that died, maybe 100 dwarves died in the exchange. This is not a good outcome for the elves. So, with that being said, having lost their silver helms very fucking quickly, and the archers are losing their protection, the spear walls are starting to falter, it becomes pretty obvious what was going on. The elves can fight. That is not something that anyone needed to be explained. The elves can fight. The issue is that when they are pressed into a fight, it's really clear that the dwarves can take a fight better than the elves. Also, on top of that, the elves were lacking a core piece of their army. As you see, they were supposed to have a dragon. That's what they were ideally supposed to have, was a dragon. But the dragon at the time was too busy hunting down dark elves, and by the time she started feeling wind that something was happening in Corvinath, she did not show up in time. So another piece of the elven army was not there. In fact, it probably wouldn't have mattered anyways, even if she was there. The garrison was way too heavily outnumbered, and of course, the dwarves were way too powerful. With the siege engines laying waste to the left flank, and with the silver helms absolutely crushed on the right, there is not much else holding the elf army together. They had to fall back. They had to retreat. With that being said, while they were fleeing back into their city, the dwarves stopped. They stopped their march forward because the kings had to decide what they were going to do. Were they going to raze the city to the ground? Were they happy where they were at and just said, okay, we defeated their army, let's pull back? What were they going to do? Thankfully, with the 2 blue stars here I've drawn, 2 kings brought their own runesmiths in case there was any sorcerers that the elves may have had. There wasn't any, unfortunately, but they did bring it for extra protection to their army as a more roundabout way to support it. The kings were already gloating in their victory, because after all, this battle took less than 3 hours, and they already broke the elven army, and they were already retreating back to their city. With this, many of the dwarves' greed started to show, as they were willing to just attack the city just to steal the elven riches, whereas some dwarves were pretty happy with what they've done so far. But this was not a war about money. This wasn't a war about justice. This was a war of vengeance. And in order to get vengeance, you do not leave your enemy in the eyes of mercy. You ravage them. You destroy their shit. And as Snorri said himself, "By Grungni, tear it all down." Which is exactly what they did. So, the battle resumed. The elves, being reported as only having 8,000 soldiers left, they were realizing real quickly that they are running out of arrows, and there's way too many dwarves. Still 45,000 dwarves, despite the few hundred they may have killed, and now they have lost around half their number. The elves were looking pretty damn bad. Really bad. The only strategy they had left was just to hope that their walls held, and then just rain every last arrow they had into the dwarves. And hopefully, the last few horses that they had in the city would charge out and break the dwarves. Even a little bit would help relieve the city. But these are dwarves, and they are pissed. So the siege continues. The siege engines are still laying waste to the city, and on top of that, Barak Var has their own miners charge out against the city gates with their hammers. That's right, hammers, not picks. And just start wailing at the city gate, going ho, hi, ho, hi, ho, hi. And in the middle of their ho-hiing, an occasional arrow would meet its mark on a dwarven's face, so there would be less dwarves saying it, but they still continued, hammering out the gate. It was upon hammering the gate that Barak Var realized something very important. These gates are not flimsical like the elves. The gates are actually well fortified. You see, the dwarven army in all their bluster decided not to tear down a tree and turn it into a battering ram to make their siege a little bit easier. No. they decided, oh, these Thag and Elgi are just weak and flimsy. Their gates must be the same. Well, nope, not at all. In fact, many of the dwarves were very shocked at the realization of just how tough this damn gate was. But these are dwarves. After a few bashes against the damn gate, they could hear the oak splitting in twain, upon which the dwarves hammer even more crazily because they realize, hey, this gate is breaking down. Let's break this bitch completely down. With the gate down, there is only a few things left for the dwarves to deal with, which is 1, the elven people, and 2, the big spear wall that's right in front of them, with scores of archers coming down the watchtowers to get a better shot at the dwarves coming through the gate. This is where the fighting gets a little bit more bloody than it had to be. You see, because the dwarves didn't do a battering ram to a more clean, organized, military fight, and also because they didn't tear down the walls with the grudge throwers and the bolt throwers, instead they just used it to attack the garrison rather than the walls, this meant that all the dwarves were funneling in through one choke point. And, of course, that makes the elves' mission a little bit easier, but honestly, it didn't really change much, because the dwarves were just too overwhelming for the spear wall to handle. After all, the spear wall is a garrison. It's not exactly like an amazing army. And the spear wall is, of course, a mixture of a few dudes who were already fighting before who retreated, so they're a little winded. And also, the spear wall was easily overrun with just how many dwarves jumped on top of the shields. After all, the dwarves are pretty weighty motherfuckers. They're pretty staunch, pretty tough guys. So when they jumped on the shields, it was over. It was over before it even began. Upon which the lord of the city decides, this is it. I gotta charge. So he charges in with his horses, but to his surprise, Barakvar's Hearthguard comes in and takes the charge head on, where the king himself shoulder charges the lord of the city's horse, breaking its ribs. And then while the horse and its master was down, and the guy was begging for his life, tears coming down his face, the king showed no remorse. One whack of his hammer sent the guy's neck split into 2. Yes, now the pillaging can begin. Many of the archers by this point in time have run out of arrows in their quiver, had started to pick up either a dagger, a knife, or just flat out ran across the city. As we have a giant pink blob here, many of the citizenry were fleeing, but the dwarves were in hot pursuit, massacring everybody, slamming their hammers down onto people's foreheads, maybe breaking a few houses just for the fuck of it. Stealing a lot of riches was also some too, stuffing their pockets full of goodies that they've unrightfully taken from the elves. Now, upon which the dragon finally returns, and the dragon sees that there is so much smoke coming from the city that it can barely see what's actually going on down below. Seeing the dwarven king who is leading the throng, dwarven prince, Snorri Halfhand, the dragon rider attempts to charge at him, but realizes the folly of this and the fact that it would be pointless even if she did kill him, as the city was totally lost and it is her responsibility that she should have been there to defend it. So she breaks away in tears and goes off to warn the next city, Tor Alessi, the next great siege to occur next. Besides that, that's been Freeze 700. I am out. See you guys next time. I hope you guys enjoyed looking at some of the pictures and diagrams. And as always, like, comment, subscribe. I'm expecting to do more War of Vengeance videos. Gonna do a lot more actually in the later future. This has been really fun for me. I hope it's been fun for you. See you guys next time.